It's a pleasure now to be able to say hipsters, flipsters, and finger-popping daddies. Knock me your lumps. And that's because I'm about to introduce the man who revived the great Lord Buckley, the hippest jazz comic entertainer of the 1950s, through his one-man show. That's one of his relevancies for this conference. C.P. Lee is an emeritus fellow of Salford University, where for many years he was the head of film studies and also a musicologist. He's written about Bob Dylan amongst many others. But to me, and I want to make this quite personal if you don't mind, to me, C.P. Lee still remains the front man of Alberto Illustrious Paranoias from the 1970s and 80s. For those of you who don't know the Albertos, you can look them up on Wikipedia, and it doesn't really give you a complete flavour of them, mainly because most of the points of reference may be alien to you as well. Compared to the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band, some of you may know, the Austin Lounge Lizards, who actually I don't really know. To me, they were very similar to the Firesign Theatre, as some of you may know. A kind of surreal extension of the British Goon Show in some ways. They gave the Manchester music scene a satirically cutting and comic edge in the 1970s. And to me, as I said, this is the city I grew up in as a teenager, and I still feel like a little teenager in the presence of CP. And that's because, to me, he was the man who introduced me to my man, William Burroughs. There were probably copies of Naked Lunch floating around amongst the drugs in the 1970s and 80s, but CP didn't give me something to read. He gave me something to hear. Actually got what he gave me in this bag. Mr. Lee, I hope you'll recognise the artefact I'm about to produce.
Recognise the envelope.
You've seen this envelope before, ladies and gentlemen. Sometime about 35 or so years ago, CP made this for me. Does this look familiar? Okay. I have kept these cassettes all these years, long after I've had a machine able to play them, because they were my point of entry. They were my gateway drug. And on this tape, this was Burroughs reading from A Naked Lunch and my own personal favourite, Nova Express. And I remember thinking, well, if CP, who was the coolest man I had ever met, if he found this guy cool, then I would find it cool. It's taken me a long time to have any clue what Burroughs had been up to, but I spent a long time, and most of it is down to you. So I will tip my hat to you, CP, for turning me on and tuning me in. Now, without further ado, the conference proper begins. I give you patience with Doug and I courtesy introducing things. Now it gets more interesting. I'd like to present, ladies and gentlemen, C.P. Lee.
As an elder member of the community, I will now attempt to mount the rostrum. Hello, thank you very much, and I'm not crying with tears of joy and laughter at that great introduction, and I'm very sorry for laying this on you. Look what it's led to, a life mistake. I'm really honoured to be being invited here to do a keynote address to a conference of this calibre, and something which appeals to me, and I think is worthy, and all the things that Oliver was saying about the state that this country finds itself in today. For the first time since Thursday night, I actually feel happy. So the conference, if nothing else, has brought back a sense of purpose and reality to me. So, when I was invited to do this, I thought, what can I do? And I'm going to use myself as a gateway. So here we go. This is a keynote. Look at the image of the beat and beat culture, both in America and the UK, as viewed through the lens of popular culture, principally TV, film and comic books. So, I hope now this will work. Here we go. Behold, here stands before us the noble beatnik with his partner, the beat chick, who's at the top of the head. See what the guy's doing? He's clicking his fingers like this. And why? Because we were told that that's how beats applauded. They were too cool to clap, but not too square to click. Let's pause for a momentarily witty break, or a beat wit as I call it. What do you feed a beatnik horse? Hey man! Seriously, we can see the beginnings of all this in the 1930s with the rise of a subcultural group that became known as hipsters. But it goes back even further than that. Beats are the descendants of hipsters, and hipsters descended from hep. This is a novel by a guy called George V. Hobart, and it's called, as you can see, Jim Hickey, A Story of the One-Night Stands. It was published, well, I'll save this for a moment, and there's a line in it where a character says, "Say, Danny, at this rate, it'll take about 629 shows to get us to Jersey City. Are you hip?" 1904. So the language is laid down solid there. Where else could it possibly come from? Just to confuse things, it can be argued that beats and hipsters descend from hep to hip. And hep is a Senegalese word. I can't spell. It's like X-J-I-P, and it's hep. Hep. And it was a slave word, meaning watch out, the boss is around, be aware. Hep. So you were hep to what was happening. Like these cats in a juke joint in the 1930s in Mississippi, these cats are hep. Next slide. We see the beginnings of the beat emerge and coalesce through the word hep. People who were hep gave rise to the subcultural group known as hipsters. And it was a movement that recognized fellow members by being hep, by being aware to certain things, fashion, music, and morals. Here's a guy called Cab Calloway. Now I know that some of us will remember Cab Calloway. Younger people might remember Cab Calloway through his appearance in the Blues Brothers, which was one of the few good things that Belushi did, was bring out artists who should have been more famous than they were. Cab Calloway in that sang Minnie the Moocher. I briefly paused to, "This is the story of Minnie the Moocher. She was a world out hoochie coocher. Well, hidey, hidey, hi. Yeah, enough of that. Cool. So there you go. That's Cab Calloway. There is hep. Now, hep becomes hip, and the hep cats, these underground flaneurs, become the hipsters. A predominantly young, white, urbanite movement who adopted the fashions and slang of African Americans. In the 1950s, a little after their time, hipsters were discussed and put under the microscope in Norman Mailer's essay on the white Negro. But let's meet a man who claims to have coined the phrase hipster. It's a piece of movie footage from 1944, a particular favourite of mine and soon to become a firm friend of yours, Harry the Hipster Gibson.
Oh, handsome Harry the Hipster, he's the boy with all the chicks. He plays piano like mad and sings sad. He makes those mellow kicks. Come on, handsome Harry the Clipster, cause you're hot before you go. Straight again from the Johnny's and out of gone. I was only told, and every night you find him around the club, playing and singing so wise. Oh, and he wants to get still with a solid stud. He comes out like a motherless child. Come on, handsome Harry the Clipster, man, he'll never marry his sister. He got a shape in a day, start his game. Talk about Harry the Hipster.
Harry came from Harlem, and he attended Juilliard Music School as a classical pianist scholar. But in his spare time, he used to dig this stuff, and he claims and says quite rightly that the language that he used, it becomes a hipster vernacular, was the ordinary language of the street. It wasn't something, it wasn't an affectation. And in a moment, at the end of this dance, he's going to demonstrate that for us. So, monsieur.
Well, look at here, but ain't Howard the Hopster. What you say, man? You know I ain't been around, been out of town. Doing those one-night stands, yeah, that's right, having a ball, man. You still working down at Brian Jordan? Well, Sonny Jack, why don't you fall down and say, we'll have some kids, man, we'll have a ball. Well, please, Jack, I'll be there. And who's that frantic chick you got stashed with you there? Well, look at here, I solid forgot. That's my kid's sister. Kelly's carrying the clips, The collar, Kelly's carrying the clips. She's the chick with all the chicks.
There we go. Barry the Hipster Gibson, 1944. When he opened his acts in nightclubs, he had an aide who used to hide in roof spaces, and as he came on to the tunes of Every Time It Rains, Pennies from Heaven, they showered the audience with Benzodrine. Sang, every time it rains, pennies from heaven. In fact, he wrote one of the great songs of the Rebellion, which was called Who Put the Benzodrine in Mrs. Murphy's Ovaltine? Great song, came out in 1947. So, meanwhile, in a dark alleyway in New York or San Francisco, or possibly maybe Jupiter, a smart-ass bunch of people who hung on the periphery of hip were beginning to create their own scene via a delirious mix of language, literature, drugs, wine, and sex. The beats were coming. 1948, Jack Kerouac used the phrase beat generation to describe the natural, organic progression from the hipster, or the outsider, the existentialist, the anti-conformist Amerikaner Jugend. He got it from Bill Burroughs' friend Herbert Huncke. Some say it may have originated in African-American lexicon. Beat in African-American in the 1930s and 40s meant tired. Beat to my socks, Jack. It could also stem from the term beatific, beat, a Zen state of Satori, Buddhist nirvana, a transcendent state of mind, the transubstantiation point of enlightenment, or, as here in Britain, possibly, the word beat was used to describe a lazy layabout, a deadbeat. And we'll be meeting some English deadbeats in a little while. Which brings us to me. As a child in 1950s Britain, what was my frame of reference for beatnik and beat culture? As you might expect, it came through the window of popular culture, and that was TV and film. And this show in particular, 77 Sunset Strip. 77 Sunset Strip. 77 Sunset Strip. To us, it was an exoticism glimpsed in an unattainable object of desire. This show, 77 Sunset Strip, with the finger clicks, was an American TV series about a private detective in Hollywood. It was so unlike Dixon of Dock Green as to appear as if from another planet. In amidst its glamorous private eyes, cars and beautiful women, its modernism and veneers of cool, there was a character who helped us take our first stumbling steps into beatdom. A wisecracking young kid who did what he wanted. Even the rest of the cast stood back in awe of his shimmering freestyle use of language. Ed Cookie Burns. Cookie was part of the zeitgeist. An actor called Ed Byrne. He landed this small role in the TV series, but grew to become the show's surprise hit. Originally, he played a teen car park attendant. He was a sidekick kid who was part beatnik, part hipster called Cookie. Cookie had his own way of talking. If he wished to say, that young lady is pretty, he'd say, that chick's the ginchiest. If he'd had a bad week, he'd say, man, that was a dark 7th. And if he wanted to get somewhere and leave, he'd say, let's peel from this gig. If he wanted to go to sleep, he'd pile on some Z's, welcoming us to the land of Nod. Cookie became so popular that he branched out into pop music. And he had a top 10 hit in America with Cookie, Lend Me Your Comb. And here, the inevitable, even Bob Dylan did it, a Christmas album. This one, Yulesville. But I look around your sea of eager young faces, and I know what you're thinking. He's not a beatnik. He's not even a beat. But, and this is what's most important, he's what television thought a beat was. Here I am at home in 1955. That's a fairly representative picture, except my father would be lying on the floor dead drunk. Well, better him than me. So, I was constantly, through the television, exposed to media stereotypes of beat culture. And that created an impact on me and my generation here and in the States. It is a culture that still lingers within aspects of our 21st century culture, language and style. But I reiterate, it was TV that brought it home to me. Specifically, with this, swinging. It's 1962, and the UK becomes hip to the groove with this man, a comedian called Norman Vaughan. Norman turned the nation onto a groove thang by appropriating the vernacular. The beat phrase, swinging, entered common usage through his introduction of the word as an adjective or a superlative, when he hosted a TV show on Sunday night called Sunday Night at the London Palladium. A show which was so popular, it was watched in an incredible 9 million homes every Sunday evening. And importantly, no coincidence, Sunday Night at the London Palladium went on immediately after 77 Sunset Strip. As soon as Norman sprang his swinging catchphrase on the nation, everybody became hip overnight. The next day at school, at college, and work, and in shops, we were all going around saying, "Swingy, dodgy, swingy, dodgy, swingy, dodgy." Some of you must remember that. It was one of the first introductions to the hip vernacular. Now, TV continued to feed us what they thought beat culture looked like and how hipsters and beats behaved and spoke. We got served ideas in pop programs like this one, Cool for Cats from 1960, shown also on ITV, this time on a Saturday night. Dig the presenter.
Say, how's the weather with you? I ask because down here in Capland it's a stinkeroo summer. And you know that they had the gall to put out a summer disc, summer, enough to make a disc curl at the edges. But just in case you two have forgotten what summer should be like, we're going to give you Bud and His Buddies singing June, July, and August.
Now, a really hip song.
June, July, and August.
So wouldn't we be singing this again in Sophia Keller's? Hey, you're slaying me. Thank you. Well, laid back, eh? Hip. Transatlantic accent from the great Kent Walton, who was actually a wrestling commentator. But he had this transatlantic accent. Perfect for presenting pop to the kids. And there he is with his vaguely hip-sounding words. I can't even remember what they were. They were so Coolville. A slight, thin sliver of what passed for cool. And there must be some way out of here. Well, there is. Let Nelson Riddle's theme tune start the show. Another TV series from the States that was shown on ITV, and one I'd nearly forgotten, Route 66. The writer-director Sterling Silliphant had read On the Road and decided existential angst between two men in a car travelling across America would make great ratings. And it did. Surprisingly, or not, Jack Kerouac instructed his lawyers to take legal action for ripping off the idea, but it didn't get anywhere. The networks were too powerful. Let's dig a bit of dialogue.
Oh, he's down Poland Avenue. That takes us into South Avenue. Then we cross the Mahoning onto Wood Street, and that's where the arena's supposed to be. And Johnny Copa. Look, if this guy's so important, how come you never mentioned him before? It's been a lot of years, 10, 11. Well, I hope it's worth it. Youngstown is not exactly on our course. Look, if somebody said to you you could take a detour to see Caesar or Napoleon, wouldn't you take that detour? Caesar, Napoleon, those are the big guys you met in books. Me, I met my own kings, face to face in the back alleys. Who's Napoleon compared to Tony Gardella, the first guy that closed both my eyes with one punch? Who's Caesar compared to Flip Mahoney, the guy that knocked out my baby teeth?
So there you go, Route 66, the long forgotten TV show. And each episode was filmed in a different part of America as they went across. It's quite groundbreaking, quite an interesting show. But again, it's what the media perceive as beat culture would be. It's cleaned up, except for George Maharis, who went his own way later on. But for us, it's freak stuff. What's going on here? This is crazy stuff. Very, very interesting. You can get in your car and just go. You don't have to have a job. You pick things up wherever you go. Would have been great if people could have afforded cars here. But another gateway out was to be found at the newsagent. In the early 60s, when I popped out to get my copy of Wizard, one day I suddenly noticed on the shelf a new product, shiny and smooth. Came from across the Atlantic along with Superman and Batman. But this one was different. It was crazy. It was taking the mickey out of everything. It was Alfred E. Newman, and it was Mad, man. Mad magazine satirized everything. But in particular, it set its sights on what its creator, William Gaines, perceived as pretentious and phony. But even when Mad set up beat culture, you got the feeling that it would rather have been part of it than Lyndon Johnson's soon-to-come Great Society. Here's the subscription panel for Mad in 1961. All the tropes are here. You can't actually see the bit of text at the top that says, Mad sends me! The beard, the beret, the clarinet. Quite why the model isn't wearing shades is a bit of a mystery, but we only have to look at this language. Be way out, subscribe to Mad. Mad sends me. I find like Mad. I'm real gone from the News Age stuff. It's packed with signifiers from and tropes from this idea of beatdom. Here's a panel in Mad based on Pygmalion. They used to do these parodies, where a beat poet sells his soul to Madison Avenue madmen. And we have a song here, which I shall have to read from here, which is based on the tune of Wouldn't It Be Lovely? All I want is a pad somewhere, way downtown near the village square, without a phone or care, or wouldn't it be Kerouac? Now the use of the word Kerouac implies that the audience, the readership, know who you're talking about. Otherwise satire doesn't work, and this is a satirical magazine. Did I know the name Kerouac then? No, but I sure as shit was going to find out as soon as I could, because it was in Mad magazine, and thus for me began the journey. Time for some more beatwit humour. Two beatniks walking along a railway line, and one said to the other, man, will these stairs ever get to the top? Such jokes and images of beats, as distant and exotic as they were to me in the early 60s, fueled my desire to know more about the culture they were sending up. I wanted to know more about these people I was reading about and seeing, more about the otherness of the beats. Here's another magazine from way back then. This is called Beatnik. Teen comic from DC Funnies. It followed up on Mad's successful parodies, and they produced these comic strip exploitation stand-ups of beat culture. Beatnik, just one of the many. And he's, oh, hey Pop, dig that crazy snow. Now it's snow, you know what I mean? But back then, nobody knew that. Anyway, the fashion, the music, the language of the emerging tribe. These parodies were society's way of coping with something that it couldn't quite explain or understand. Now, here again in the UK, serious intellectual magazines such as Men Only turn their analytical gaze onto the beat phenomenon. This is the June 1960 edition, and a snip at 2 shillings. And inside we have an article by the intriguingly named Douglas Worth, an anagram perhaps of wrath. Anyway, Dougie is basically filching his piece from a recently published book called The Holy Barbarians by Lawrence Lipton, who Worth describes as a poet, novelist and broadcaster who, quote, is proud to acknowledge that he is a beat himself. Statements inside this article like, my beard is my letter of resignation from the rat race. And the beats have certainly cut down on rent razor blades and keeping up with the Joneses. It's a 6-page article that ends up with a handy beat vocabulary. Beats were popping up everywhere, and just in case you wanted to be one, beatnik ads were commonplace in all sorts of magazines. Certainly in the shops I went into. Cheap American pulp comics and magazines ranging from titles like Man's World to True Detective. Rubbing shoulders with Charles, in the ads, rubbing shoulders with Charles Atlas and his bodybuilding promises, ads for ant farms with the beatnik ads, sending out their message of promises of an afterlife before you passed away. That the simple addition of a beard and a beret would initiate you into another place. Here's another one. Also compelling me to follow my dreams. And look, it includes 6, yes, count them, 6 beatnik poems. No, be the first beatnik on your block. Fantastic. Hey, beatnik, hear about the beatnik who drowned? Too far out, man. Generally, as a rule, subcultures develop their own language, partly as a reaction against conventional society, and also as a kind of secret language that keeps out those you want to exclude. And it didn't take long before the coming together of the beat movement's interplay with words and meanings, drawn together from a variety of subcultural sources, began to bewitch, bother and bewilder the media, that we get stuff like this. On the left there, How to Speak Hip, an instructional LP. You could take it home, and within 20 minutes, you could speak hip. Wonderful. I could teach you all in less time myself, but unfortunately it's so simple it evades me. Now, on the right there, straight from the fridge, Dad, is a modern reprint, a compilation of a lot of the vintage publications, such as the Dictionary and the Beatnik Bible. Anyway, Max de Chesnay's Straight from the Fridge, Dad. These are the kind of books that would help parents struggling with what their children were saying to them. But the further out it went, the harder the straight world tried to catch up. Here's Hollywood having a go and succeeding in the film High School Confidential.
Now, how'd you like J.I. laid in the history of it? Now, you heard that square bitch he was putting down about Christopher Columbus, our founder. Now, I ask you, is this a bring down? Columbus. Why, man, he was the hippest. Now, one spring day when Chris was sitting at the beach goofing, he dug that the world was round. And with his crazy idea stashed in his lid, he swung over to the royal pad to cut up a few touches with a cool chick, Queen Isabella. Who was a swinger? Dell took a long look at him and said, Christy, what is this jazz you're putting down about our planet being round? She said, everybody hip that it's square. The only thing square about this world are the cats what live it. He said, now look, how many...
Interesting little piece of footage. This scene was written by a collaboration between Mel Wells, who was an actor and a clinical psychologist, and the great late Richard Lord Buckley, the high priest of hip himself. Now, this scene speaks directly to those members of the audience in the movie house who understood it. It meant something to them. But true to the form of subcultural lingo, it would have left any straights in the cinema completely bewildered. Here's another example of Hollywood having a go, and it's Roger Corman, the great exploitation filmmaker himself, and
the artist, the poet, the figure model who loves to show it.
You suppose he could be physically attracted to her?
No, man, he ain't the type. He don't get enough vitamin E.
All these are beat. All these you'll meet in a bucket of blood.
Crazy.
Enjoy yourself. Where the hilarious enjoy the horrifying. In a bucket of blood. No, you're gonna shoot me, don't shoot! Come to the land of living dreams, where realists dream of the unreal.
Walter, you've done something to me. Something deep down inside of my prana. Oh, Walter, I want to be with you. You're creative.
The creative urge at its most primitive. But I'm deeply moved, and I shall compose a poem. Love is art, art is love. It's the weirdest and the wildest. I don't want to make statues anymore. I want to get married to you.
Buckets of Blood, Roger Corman's knowing satire of Venice beat artists. They're all here, poets, the painters, the models, cool jazz and hot chicks with a riff on reefers and a serial killer who dips his victims in plaster of Paris and turns them into prize-winning statues. Crazy, man! Can't wait to join them. Where do I sign up? Oh, this is England. Anybody there? Ooh. By 1965, a new moon was rising and we were beginning to take the media with a pinch of salt. Things were stirring in a dozen different directions. In this country, pockets of resistance to the propagation of myths about geek culture celebrated a rising of consciousness with a gathering at the Royal Albert Hall for the International Poetry Olympics. It was an alchemical wedding, the fusion of beat and counterculture, the awakening of the tribes of Albion. This was not Norman Vaughan in his exhortation for everybody to shout, "Swinging!" Bob Dylan was not going to appear on Sunday night at the London Palladium. but his visits here in 1964, 65 and 66 lit the fuse and helped fan the flames that would lead to massive cultural changes throughout the rest of the 20th century. Dylan was the golden child of the Dharma Buns. Here he is in May 1966 in London, filmed in a Kensington street and being captivated by a sign. Dylan is physically, seemingly unable to stop what pours out of him. It's an example of explosive wordplay as he uses and rearranges 22 words again and again in a potent invocation of strange beings and stranger doings. It's verbal cut-ups, fragmented resonances of Burroughs and Geison's experiments a short while from before, dragged into the swirling world of pop and rock.
I'm looking for a place that will collect, clip, bath, and return my dog, KN17727, cigarettes and tobacco, animals and birds bought or sold on commission. I want a dog that's going to collect and clean my bath, return my cigarette, and give tobacco to my animals, and give my birds a commission. I'm looking for somebody to sell my dog, touch my clip, buy my animal, and straighten out my bird. I look for a place to bathe my bird, buy my dog, collect my clip, sell me cigarettes, and commission my bath. I'm looking for a place that's going to collect my commission, sell my dog, burn my bird, and sell me the cigarette. You know, bird my buy, collect my will, and bathe my commission. I'm looking for a place that's going to animal my soul, emit my return, bathe my foot, and collect my dog. Commission me to sell my animal to the bird to clip, and buy my bath, and return me back to the cigarette.
Phew. Bob Dylan doing cut-ups. By 1965, we'd outgrown beatniks, beards, berets, and poetry as the signifiers of a subcultural tribe. We'd surrendered to the archangels of elegant eloquence. At last, with Dylan and Ginsberg, what you saw was what you got. They successfully avoided media manipulation, and no longer was the imagery of the beats so filtered and cleaned up through the lens of popular media that you could say that with them, the 60s beats had grown into a powerful counterculture that was busy creating its own media. Several years before William Burroughs was to declare Notting Hill Gate into Zone B, British beat had laid claim to other